Welcome to our January 2025 episode of Silver Linings Talk Show. We have a panel, which was my dream to put together and join us here today. And you are going to be amazed at what we have to share with you. Let's start by introducing who we have, and then we'll get into the meat of the program. How about that? Mm-hmm. I don't want to divulge anything yet. We don't want to title this yet, but you just wait. We'll start here with Barb.
So I'm Barb Nangle. I am a boundaries coach, a speaker, and a podcaster. I work with professional women who say yes when they really want to say no, and who neglect themselves because they're so focused on others. And I do that because that's former me. So I worked for 19 years at Yale University and got into 12-step recovery for codependence at that time. And I was astonished at the ripple effect of me alone building boundaries on my team and my project. And so I want for other women to have the same kind of freedom and healthy relationships and energy that I got. And I've also realized that women are not going to make the inroads into the power structures of society if they keep saying yes to things they don't want to do and if they keep neglecting themselves. And I want shifts to happen.
Awesome, love that.
Yes, definitely.
And Alex, introduce yourself to us.
Hi, I'm Alex Zanardi. I am the owner and life strategist of the True 180. I work with clients that are going through major life transitions, and we know that there are many different transitions that we go through, but I tend to work with clients going through some of the toughest life transitions. And when we go through a transition, what we like to do is recoil, unless you have somebody there to walk you forward into the life you may want or need, the more joyful, prosperous life. And I'll meet them where they are, but I will never let them stay there, because I think that that's really one of the themes of today, is that we're going to push forward, and that's what I help my clients do.
Love that. Magdalise.
Hi. Well, my name is Magdalise, and I call myself a mompreneur advocate and the founder of Thriving Moms, a virtual assistant service dedicated to empower mompreneurs so they can find and create that balance between life and business. As we all know, it's hard for us. We have so many things on our plate, so I just try to support them with tailored solutions so they can create that balance and have the time that they want in their life.
Nice. So, with all the introductions, you may have an idea about our conversation today.
Absolutely.
And I'm so excited to get into it, but before we do that, we've got to bring Diane on.
Absolutely.
So Diane joins us via Zoom from North Carolina.
Hello.
Hello, Miss Diane.
Hi, everybody. Great to see everyone.
Great to see you. So, Diane, if you can kind of start us off on our awesome panel conversation.
Yes, I will. So, the first question we thought we'd put out there is for the ladies. What do you think women struggle with the most and need more of in their lives? That's a jam-packed question, I know.
And we got a jam-packed hour.
I'd like to start with that.
Yeah. I'll take that first. So I think they have a really hard time saying yes to themselves, which means usually saying no to other people and putting themselves first. I think it's not that men don't have a hard time with that, but I think that women have a much harder time with that than men do, partly because we've been taught that being selfish is like the worst thing, and that it is selfish to take care of yourself. It's actually not. It's self-preservation. I advocate for people pouring from the overflow rather than from an empty cup. And you can't do that if you don't take care of yourself. And if you're not willing to say no to other people, it's really hard to have time to say yes to yourself. So I'm a big fan of self-care. And to me, self-care means what energizes you. So it doesn't necessarily mean you go to the spa, but we want to do something on a continual basis to refuel every day, multiple times a day, even if it just takes 30 seconds.
Right. I think it's definitely about how do we support ourselves throughout the day also. Because sometimes people may think, well, if I do this one thing, in the morning, it's going to sustain me for the entire day. And there is so much energetically that comes at us, right? And so many life demands where we're stretched in so many directions that it's about how can we support ourselves like throughout the day with, and it could be a variety of things. And I think part of it is being on that massage table too.
Yes. So as a lifelong wellness practitioner and a massage therapist of 18 years, I will agree a lot of women have a very hard time saying no to obligations and yes to self-care. And self-care means so many things. People think that it's just the massage. It's not. I think women equally struggle with other female relationships, even though we highlight the, the intimate relationships that they have, but the friendships too. I think that we struggle as women to make sure that we're surrounded by the right circle. It's very important to have other women that have the same values, that push and encourage you and remind you to take care of yourself. And as we know, there is a stereotypical kind of context around female relationships that they're just gossipy and commiserating, and I feel like sometimes that happens and it pulls you down versus then build you up. So that's huge.
I think that's exactly kind of tying those two things together. We often say yes because they're my friend, I'm going to go out and enjoy this. But then when we come back and we're drained, we're not really connecting the fact that maybe we're not saying, we should be saying no to going with that person because they're maybe not our right person. And it's really hard to admit that. Right?
Yeah.
I would like to say that as women, I found that we have a hard time delegating. I think we have a big challenge, like letting go of control, and sometimes like focusing on the outcome and not in the process. Sometimes we want to, it's like our way or the highway, and sometimes we just need to embrace like the difference that could be between you and your partner, or between you and your coworker or your employee. And I think if we focus on how good is delegating and how we can reclaim back our time and our sanity, we will do it more often. So, yeah.
That's a very good point too, because that's kind of the no yes thing too, where we're like, if we let somebody else do it and maybe it's not perfect, we're gaining something on the other end if we could just let go.
Yes.
Or maybe it's not done exactly how we would have done it,
Yeah.
but the fact is it's done.
Right.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
it wasn't us having to expel that energy to do it, and maybe we had time to do something else, so then later we could do what we wanted.
Yes.
Super
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
It is.
So what we definitely got from this first question was we need more self-care.
Yes.
Agreed.
We need more like supporting ourselves through the decisions that we're making.
And
Our
expand
lives.
the view of self-care to beyond the manicures or pedicures or sleep and hydration, and look at your circles, look at those boundaries, and make sure that self-care really is something that you plan and take a look at and make sure that it's laced in your entire life.
And using your intuition, kind of knowing, does that feel right? Should I do that? And you can say no, and it's okay. And no is a complete sentence.
Love that.
So, we came up with some really great conversational topics for today. We kind of collaborated beforehand because we have, 6 great minds, 6 women coming together. So we wanted to make sure, important things are out on the table. So one of ours was, so often we might hear ourselves or find ourselves saying, well, it's not that bad. My situation isn't that bad, when we kind of compare it to someone else's situation. And what do we do when we do that? We then don't give ourselves that support. We put ourselves last emotionally, mentally, physically, in every way, because we think, well, I shouldn't be complaining. I shouldn't want something different because it's not that bad. So I'm putting that out as a great topic of conversation, because I'm sure there's a lot of people in our audience who are like, oh my God, I do that.
Yeah. I'd actually like to take that first, if that's okay.
Sure.
And share a little bit of personal information. So I'm in a trauma recovery program, and I clearly did not have it as bad as many of the people in the program, and so I was always making these excuses. And then I heard my meditation teacher say this: I have experienced 100% of my trauma and 0% of other people's trauma. So stop comparing trauma. And then I've also heard people talk about comparisonitis. Like when you're constantly comparing yourself with other people, you're either making yourself better or worse than them. And one of the most important gifts that I've learned in 12-step recovery is humility, because I tend to be sort of on the arrogant side, whereas many of the people in my program tend to be on the low self-esteem side. And I love the definition of humility, which is I'm no better and no worse than anyone else. So when we're comparing ourselves, we're putting ourselves on this scale of better and worse. And that's not really effective to have a life in which you thrive. So it should be, what are my standards for my life? And am I living up to those standards, as opposed to comparing my life to someone else's standards? Like, I get to have the life that I want to have.
And I can give myself permission to ask for help or ask for support or hire someone to help and be able to give that piece.
Yes.
I think that's super important.
Absolutely.
I think moms, we struggle a lot with that part, like having permission to maybe lay on the couch and watch, a TV show, or feeling like we have to be productive all the time. Or like when I take care of myself, I'm neglecting my children. So I feel like being able to, like you were saying, Barb, I love that, because I think in motherhood we have so much comparison. We have social media, we have like the expectations that society put towards us, that I think it's really hard to battle. But like you were saying, like give ourselves that permission to say, you know what, I don't have to do it all. I don't have to take care of everything. I don't have to know it all. I can ask for help, and that's okay. That's completely okay.
Yes. And it's not so bad. I used to have that as a reel in my head, raised by two business owners, always pushed to do more and better. It's not that bad. I suck it up. And what I found is when I stopped doing that to myself, I was better able to hold space for other people, because we inadvertently dismiss or minimize somebody else's experience and we don't have to say those words, it's not that bad, but there's other ways that we say it, like, well, it could be worse, or and you try to shift the perspective, but you're invalidating how somebody's feeling. And trauma and pain are relative. That's what that person is going through. And could it be worse? It could always be worse. But that's not forming connection and conversation. That's not empathizing on any level. And it really has the power to ruin a relationship or really hurt a person that you're in conversation with. So that's my take on that.
I can heavily relate to all of that being, I was a stay-at-home mom for quite a few years, and I opted to go help in the classroom and hire a nanny for my youngest daughter, and I often felt judged for that, but it made me happy to be able to spend that time in the classroom. And when I came home to my youngest, who most of the time she was napping during that time, right? So was it going to be quality time with her? No. But that's the choice I made, and I think overall it was the right choice for me. And people can be very judgmental when it comes to that. So I'm going to roll into my next question, and it is more about women, especially mothers, that we do make so many sacrifices, but we do feel so much guilt when we, make decisions like I just mentioned. How do we get over that guilt? How do we move away from the guilt and know deep in our hearts that we made the right decision for ourselves and shut out the noise from society and those around us who may be in our ear judging us for that, whether it be a family member, a friend, or someone close to us.
Yeah.
Do you want to take that first, Meg?
Yes, definitely. I think something that I use with moms, with my clients, is to being able to make a difference between what is a real guilt. I think we all gonna, feel that guilt and just open your arms and welcome the guilt, but then at the same time, make a difference. So guilt, you will feel guilt if I scream at you. And I will feel guilt if I scream at you, and I will be like, or if I scream to my children, or if I talk rough to my husband, I will say, man, why did I do that? Right? I feel so guilty. I feel so bad because I did something wrong. Now, if I decide to go and get a massage, if I go and decide to go for a walk because I need to vent, I need to relax, am I really hurting someone by doing that? I think I'm doing a favor to myself. And it's going to be a ripple effect because, like I always said, Magdalise without self-care and Magdalise with self-care is two completely different person. So I think it's going to be really like, am I supposed to feel guilty? And the other day is so funny because I was going to an event and my stepdaughter, she was at home. And she was like, I was taking a shower. When I go out, she blocked the door. She was like, be careful when you come out. And she blocked the door. And then she was like closing the door. She was making it very difficult for me to go and leave. She was like, I don't want you to go. And I was like, I understand that you don't want me to go, but I really want to do this because it's very good for me and for my business. And when I come back, I can spend time with you. Okay? And that's it. It gives me that feeling of guilty. I was like, no, wait a minute. I don't have to feel guilty. So I think that would be a good point of reference for moms to ask themselves, am I hurting anyone by doing this?
Well, I love what you said because there is such an importance. Guilt is a real feeling.
Yes.
And it's important to kind of be like, okay, I'm feeling guilty, and what or why am I feeling guilty? So it's kind of assessing.
Yes.
So is it true? Right?
Exactly.
Is it something that's really valid? Or is it something that I'm just feeling because I'm supposed to?
Right. Yeah. And guilt quickly turns to shame. So I am not a mom, but I have a mom, and I had a mom in business, a busy mom. And, obviously as a woman in general, if I say no, there's a level of guilt. But it's when guilt turns to shame that I think that there's the real problem. If you don't look at guilt for what it is, dissect it, and kind of process it and let it go, it turns to shame, which, the difference is guilt is I'm doing something right now, or I did something wrong, and I can fix it and correct that behavior, and shame is I am wrong. Something is wrong with me. I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad friend, I'm a bad partner. And that's where it really becomes detrimental and destructive. So, watching my mom for years, she opened a business on her own, still in existence 40 years later, and she had 2 small kids. I mean, my sister was in a baby carrier, and she was back to work 4 weeks later. And I know the guilt she felt, and I know the judgments around her, and I watched that happen, and it caused shame in her, and it took years to undo. And I know she wouldn't mind me talking about it because it's something she looked at and overcame. But it's, not being a mom, but I've seen a lot of moms really struggle with that. And for me to say, I can't handle this right now. Being a coach, everybody inside my practice or out thinks that I'm a coach. So they're coming to me with the tough stuff. And for me to have to say, you know what, I have 10 minutes, and to walk away without that guilt and say, I gave what I could give because it was quality, and I didn't hurt me helping you.
I like that too.
Yeah, so guilt and shame are the number one question I get as a boundaries coach is how do I set boundaries without the guilt and shame? And it's actually a long game to be able to cultivate that ability. And I actually say no all the time and have no guilt whatsoever, which is a miracle. Because I was in my 50s when I started building healthy boundaries. But a couple of things come to mind. So one of the reasons that people feel guilty is because they think that they're going to hurt someone's feelings. And so I like to make the distinction between harming someone and hurting someone. So it might hurt you to use a needle to take a splinter out of your finger, but it's not going to harm you. In fact, it's going to heal you. Well, it might hurt someone's feelings to set a boundary with them, but it's not going to harm them.
Yeah.
It may heal the relationship, because if you're coming clean and telling the truth and being honest,
Yes.
then it could heal the relationship. Truth be told, you may lose some relationships. It occasionally happens. At minimum, it's going to heal your relationship with yourself.
Yes.
Because you're coming clean, telling the truth, following up, showing up for yourself in a way that you never have before. And then what we want to do, this guilt is about self-judgment. And so we want to move to compassion. And what I love as the bridge between those is curiosity. So I heard this saying early in my recovery, and it helped me so much. Info, not ammo. So I always thought I had high self-esteem, but when I got in recovery, I realized I was kind of like scanning the horizon at all times for reasons to beat myself up, thus the guilt and the shame.
Yep.
But when I heard info, not ammo, the idea is when you learn something about yourself, it's information for you to learn, integrate, and grow from. It's not ammunition to beat yourself up. So in other words, you're using curiosity. That's the bridge from self-judgment to self-compassion. So what's going on here, or what might I do differently? And then I also recommend using info and not ammo with other people around you. So if you have a dynamic with someone that's difficult all the time, instead of the next time they come at you, you're like, here we go. Think to yourself, okay, this is info, not ammo. If I'm having this continual dynamic with this person, what can I do on my end to shift this dynamic? You know, what's the let me be curious about this. So I love curiosity because it's neutral, and it's going to bridge us from judgment to compassion.
Love that. What a great way to shift away from, as we talked about, the guilt.
Guilt and shame.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
to be able to
Yeah.
look at compassion and curiosity.
Yeah.
I think
And
that
I forgot to say one thing. I mentioned the long game. I'll be quick with this. The long game is to determine what matters to you. So I have my clients start with their top 5 values. And when you start making decisions, setting boundaries in your life such that you're promoting and supporting your values, the guilt and shame go away because you're getting into integrity with yourself. And integrity is another word for wholeness.
Yes.
Who doesn't want to be whole? And who's going to feel judged for being whole? So if I believe in promoting and supporting my health, and you're going to judge me because I'm not doing that because it's an unhealthy behavior, I can live with your judgment because I'm doing something that matters to me.
Oh, I love that so much.
So
So then you
Diane-
don't feel guilty. And then, and I think Diane has something to share with us before
Yeah,
she
for the
shares
next
the
question.
question. Yeah.
The next question we were going to talk about is, you know, how do you channel the how-to, the should-dos, the thoughts? And I have something to share first because I went through a cancer experience at one time in my life, and lots of people were sending me cards and telling me they're praying for me and they're thinking of me. And the experience I had is there was a morning, and it was Sunday morning, and I was going through chemo and radiation and feeling really, really crappy. And I felt like I needed to feel and receive. I guess receive is my word for right now. Is to receive all of the things they were sending to me, because I had a tendency to push it off. You know, it's okay. I'm okay. Everything's okay, right? But I sat on the couch. My experience was sitting on the couch and allowing all the prayers, because I knew a lot of people were in church and, you know, in the morning on a Sunday morning, and I could feel heat and energy pouring into my body and into my whole soul. And I even swear I levitated off of the couch at one point just to allow myself to receive. So I just wanted, and that's something I have to always remind myself of, is the receiving. You know, that's just one way I deal with the pushing it off and the guilt and that type of thing. And I just wondered too if anyone else has any problems with receiving.
You know, you brought up something that I think is so important, because I've literally had clients ask me, like, if I get a compliment, what do I do? And because it's very hard for them to accept a compliment, because what do? They dismiss it. Oh, it's an old thing that I'm wearing, or oh, they dismiss it. So what that does is that's dismissing the other person's opinion and thought of you, right? And then you are doing something negative as far as maybe decreasing your self-confidence in that moment, or just not being able to accept that compliment. So how about just being able to start with just saying thank you? Like if I'm not in the place of being able to receive as Diane was, which is fabulous,
Yeah.
how about starting with just thank you and not dismissing it, just
Yes.
owning it in that moment?
That's
Yeah.
the challenging those thoughts that are coming in that are
Yeah.
like, oh, I shouldn't accept that
Right,
compliment.
yeah.
Do I have to? Like, because that's not how I feel about it. And I like how you use the word receiving, Diane, because it's something that we aren't, and it's not the guilt, it's a positive. Like, so I think we do tend to need to be open to those feelings, right?
Yeah.
And receiving has, it kind of has this like negative core belief in how I process that. When you think to yourself, I must perform to be loved, that is my innate worthiness, is what I do for other people. Yes, that's really where it's tough to receive, because I didn't do anything to receive. So this compliment that you're giving me, what do I have to give you back?
Right.
I didn't do anything for you to receive that, so I will dismiss it. And I learned through a yoga teacher training that I went through that was very powerful. It was 4 months, probably on my last day, right before I taught my teaching class. I laid down in Shavasana, and she just said, flip your hands over. And I flipped my hands over, and it was such a simple thing. And I took a deep breath, and things started to clear for me. Like, I don't need to perform to be loved. I don't need to do anything to receive. I'm inherently worthy regardless of what I'm doing. So I used to actually feel guilty when I'd get a compliment or receive a gift or anything like that, that I hadn't, or now I feel like I owe you some sort of retribution. And it was such bad, inherent conditioning, and I had to undo that. And now that I have the experience that I have with receiving and knowing that I deserve it and I can appreciate it, it helps that other person. Like you said, I'm not dismissing their opinion or the time they took to stop and notice something and admire it in me, because one of my big whys is to inspire other people. So when they say, that speaking commitment went great, or that thing that you did the other day for me, I really appreciate, or I love your jacket, without me being like it was $10 from Marshalls, which I do only because I love Marshalls, and that's just part of who I am.
I think we all tend to do that.
Yeah.
I'm very guilty
Yeah.
of that. So
Yeah.
I'm going to remember your story, Diane, because
Yeah.
that was amazing.
This
Right?
receiving is exceedingly difficult for the type of clients that come to me. And so one of the modules that I teach is that, people with healthy boundaries let good things in as well as keeping bad things out. And often good things are things like compliments, praise, help, support. And I know for me, learning how to ask for help was absolutely transformative for me, because I felt it was very humbling as well, because I'm the helper. I'm the one that people come to for help. And I realized that I had this notion that I was somehow stepping down a level, or I felt like I was stepping down for a level. Now, intellectually, I don't believe I'm better than anyone else, but clearly on an emotional level, I felt like I was bringing myself down a level. And so that meant that I somehow thought the people I was helping were stepping down a level, and I don't actually believe that. And so seeing that was very humbling. And then learning to ask for help was just very difficult. I remember in the beginning, even thinking about it made me feel like I was going to die. And I'm not exaggerating, I'm talking like internal emergency. And now help is awesome. I love help and I love support. And I think I've actually been doing a welcoming practice a lot. When you said the hands thing, I'm like, oh, I've been doing that lately. Like, welcome whatever the experience is. And I heard somebody say at one point in time, like, it's the universe is about an exchange of energy at all times. Like, we breathe in and out. We don't just breathe out. We have to breathe in too. And so receiving is breathing in. And we're always teaching people how to treat us. We may be teaching them, treat me the same as you always have, treat me the same as you always have. But when we start to receive, we get to be in more reciprocal relationships, because if you're an overgiver, you're probably surrounded by overtakers.
Oh, that is
And
such
when
a
you
good
start
point.
receiving, you're going to start having more people around you that want to give more. And you'll create more balance in your life. And so I really love Diane's story. I especially love that she said she felt like she was levitating. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think we need to kind of move on to our next question. That is going to, because you just led us right into it, becoming self-aware of what society and those around us are doing to influence our thoughts and behaviors and distorting kind of the truth that we're seeing.
Or even our own truth.
Our own truth, right? Because that's, you kind of just led us right there. I kind of had to
Just sort of happened.
had to go there with that, and maybe
Yes.
maybe Magdalise can help start this thought off, because
Yes.
society does have
Oh, yeah.
their impressions on what we should and shouldn't
Oh,
be
yeah.
doing, whether our behaviors, and it starts so young, especially
Oh,
for,
yeah.
for girls, and I'm not discounting young men, but this
Yeah.
is a discussion about women, so we're
Yes.
sticking with it. You know, share with us
Oh,
what your
it-
thoughts are about that, because
I see it all the time, and it affected me definitely. At some point, like, I'm not getting married yet, I don't have a kid, like, how long you gonna wait? Because people expect you to, you know, go to college, get married, get the house, the dog, the kids, and that will mean that you're successful, right? And I think something that Barb says is the most important thing on your foundation, and to not let those society expectations attack yourself. And it will be to have, what is my life vision? What are my values? What do I like? I want my life to look like. What I want my husband to think about me, what I want my kids to remember about me. And I think when we can put those things together, it doesn't matter what other people say, you know? It's like we don't let that affect us, because this is what works for me
Right.
and for my life, and this is how I want my life to look like.
And I like how you know, for you, that, you know, and that's for women, that's exactly what we get. We get asked questions. When are you getting married? When, you know, whatever. Well,
Yeah.
what if you don't want to get married?
Exactly.
What, you know, and Alex,
Yes.
let's talk about what your situation with this is, because I know you have a story to tell.
So I didn't have that innate pressure growing up to get into relationships. I had the opposite, having two entrepreneurial parents. They wanted me to achieve and succeed. But the pressure for me really comes from, you know, the dating world, and why I just am not the biggest fan right now. And it's because they see that I'm a business owner and that I'm strong. So, you know, it is no secret that abusive men target strong women. Because, you know, it's not the weak that they prey on, it's the strong. So there's that. There's the relationships that I've been in that I've been targeted because, okay, so she's strong, she's intimidating, and she's highlighting my insecurities, so let me infiltrate that and pull it down. So that has been part of my experience with that. Or they think that I want to be the next Jay-Z and Beyonce. And I don't. I don't want to build an empire, I want to have a home. So, you know, they assume because I'm a business owner that I can't also be a partner outside of that role. And I've seen a lot of couples try to do both and do it all, and I haven't seen that go really well, because there isn't the separation between, you know, work Alex and home Alex. So the pressure is they either want me to maintain, in these relationships that I've had, they want me to maintain this boss-like head of the household all throughout, except then they don't want me to be bossy at home, or they want me to financially support them completely. And that's a lot of pressure. I'm 40 years old. I've had 2 relationships that did not foster the growth that I really needed, and it's because of the pressures to be something other than I am. you know, I need to be who I am.
And I think that's so important that, you know, it doesn't have to be a certain way. And I mean, let's be honest. Let's look at the divorce rate all over the world. And I think if we weren't forced into a mold or felt forced into a mold, maybe that wouldn't
Right.
exist. And that's,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what occurs to me is that there's a lot of cultural expectations for women that, you know, that we're nice, that we're kind, that we're supportive, that we're self-sacrificing, that we're not selfish. And we really internalize that. And so we want, like, who doesn't want to be good? Like, I want to be good. I want to be perceived as good, you know? But everybody's definition of what that means isn't really the same. And I think, you know, you use the word should there, and I'm a big fan of let's get rid of a should and say could. Let's get rid of have to and say get to. And this is something I constantly, I would say every time I coach a client, there's probably never a conversation where I don't say you get to, you get to, you get to, you could. Because that shift is going from feeling compelled from the outside to do something to having choice. And having choice is so liberating. So I don't have to go to this meeting. I get to go to this meeting, or I could go to this meeting. And so what that means is I'm in control of my life, as opposed to feeling like I'm at the result of the world and the world is acting on me. And for me, that brings to mind that I'm coming out of victim mentality when I start making choices. Because for me, when I got into 12-step recovery, that was hands down the most important paradigm shift. And I'm not the quintessential victim. I don't walk around going, woe is me, the world is against me, nobody likes me, I can never win. My victim mentality was way more subtle. And it was things like, well, you know, if he would just fill in the blank, then everything would be okay. Or if she would just fill in the blank, everything would be okay. So it was me acting like I have nothing to do with the status of the relationship. I have nothing to do with the team at work. And I actually do have some role there. And so coming out of that mentality enabled me to start taking responsibility for my life, which I didn't. I mean, I felt like a powerful woman of agency before recovery. So it was just mind-blowing that I had this
And then there's
mentality.
that problematic word just.
Yes.
Right? I mean, come on. We can just wipe that one right off.
Yeah.
And Diane, I'm wondering if you wanted to share that story that you told us when you were on vacation, and that feeling of I have to or I should. Do you remember that?
Yes, well, went on vacation recently, and we have not really taken a vacation in a long time. And this was going to be a 5-day vacation. I really did not want to work at all during the vacation. And I did good for the first 3 days. And then on the 4th day, my husband had to pull out his computer because he had a Zoom call that he had to do. And immediately, I wasn't even thinking, I pull out my computer and I'm starting to check my work emails and things like that. So I broke it, but at least I noticed that I broke it, and I was able then to, you know, put it away after I did a couple things. But does anyone else ever feel that way, that there's, you know, you're just feeling overwhelmed with these thoughts of, if I don't check my work, if I don't get back to work soon, then, you know, I'm not going to be whole. I don't deserve all that.
Well, I think that it doesn't always just apply to work. It applies to household things too.
I was thinking
like
the same.
the dishes,
Yes.
the changing of the sheets, or just all of the things, the have tos and the shoulds, and just putting it off. It's like pinging you.
Yeah.
And I think when we had this discussion, we talked about, couldn't we just be just for a week and not do? Like, wake up whenever. Like, have that time to just reflect and not have anything shoulding us, having to us, or whatever. So,
And I think that also went along with the thought for Diane is her husband started to go to work, right? So then it's like, oh, I should go to work too, was something that she had said. And I think that that applies perfectly also for household, because what if our significant other is doing something and we're not? Then we start to feel like, well, maybe I should be doing something. Because I've been there. I totally
But we're going to
know
change
that
that. We're
feeling.
going to say, was it
Get
not-
to.
Get to.
Or could.
Or
I
could.
could.
Oh, I
do.
get to do laundry.
Right. Or I could do
No, but
laundry
you can
now.
also
Or
say,
Or I don't
I
have.
could
get
stay on the
to
couch.
Stay on the couch.
Yes.
But I think
Exactly.
that's what we need to do more of, is say,
Yeah. I could.
I don't have to.
Right, and that's, I think, the important point
And I
here
don't,
is
and
how many
I get
times
to decide.
do people see someone or people doing stuff and then feel like, oh, well, I should be too, versus sitting here.
There's
and-
that
and doing-
comparisonitis thing.
Yes, I mean, it creeps in all different areas of our lives.
This is again where you start with what matters to you. You know.
Yeah, I think we
Absolutely.
can probably roll right into boundaries from there.
Yeah, so
because-
let's talk about
Because
boundaries.
that was perfect, Diane. One of these days, we're just
Yes.
going to go on a trip and do nothing.
Yeah. And I was actually wondering, being the boundaries coaches, what boundaries do you often see the women having the most difficulty with? Is there a certain boundary or a couple boundaries that they struggle with the most?
I wouldn't say it's types of boundaries, it's types of people, and that's the
It's
people that they're
people.
most emotionally tied to. So parents, children,
Okay.
siblings, so people that they have long standing patterns of behavior and emotional ties to. And so it's very hard to extricate yourself from a decades-long pattern of behavior. I'm living proof that it's possible to do that. Sometimes it's not going to go the way that you want. You know, I've actually lost some friendships. It's not like I sat down with them and they had a big to-do. It's just that I realized that the bulk of my friendships were people that I did all of the work, or 90+% of the work. And when I stopped doing it, I stopped seeing them.
When I work
And
Yes.
yeah, no, it's okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
when I work with people, I don't work with them so much on who they have boundaries with, but like softening the boundary a little bit. A lot of people decide that that should be like barbed wire, and I think the misconception is that I want you out of my life and away from me. But the truth is, we set those boundaries because we want you in our life,
Right.
because we value the relationship enough to
Yeah.
say, can we put some new parameters around this so that I can show up, you know, as the best of who I am, and work with you in an authentic way to enjoy you and
Yeah.
love myself at the same time. You know,
Yeah.
those boundaries are, there's a huge misconception, and a lot of people don't talk enough about what that is, and they actually don't sit and feel into different interactions and relationships. And I think that that's a lot of what the underpinning and the root problem is with boundaries, is we don't know we need them. We have no idea how to identify that somebody has crossed over them, and staying consistent with them, because you can't say one thing and draw the boundary and not be consistent. It is a practice. It takes time, it takes commitment, and it's really commitment to yourself. And it's a practice.
And I like how you both said that,
Yeah.
because you're saying, and it is the people, and sometimes it's the people you love. And then when you draw that boundary, it's up to them to either accept it or not.
Right, but
And-
you have to do the consequences,
Yes.
like
Yes,
Alex was
well,
saying,
that's
like
the
you
hard
have to follow
part.
through. And what I tell my clients is, if you
Yes.
set a boundary and you do nothing, it wasn't a boundary. It was like a hope or a wish that you had. And so consequences means, what are you going to do if they violate it? So like a really basic one is, let's say I have a no smoking boundary in my house and you light up. If you light up and I don't do anything, then it wasn't a boundary. So what am I going to do? I'm going to ask you to put it out, or I'm going to say, please leave. You can't respect my no smoking rule. Like, that's the consequence. Like, I have to do something. You know, it's not about, like, of course we want them to honor a boundary, but if they don't, then we're the one that has to change our behavior.
And there always has to be that consequence.
Yeah, or it's not really a
Some-
boundary.
Something.
Yeah.
Or while you were talking, remind me a conversation that I have with one of my clients, and she was like, I am so mad because I always say to my kids, you know, I create this specific area to put all the letters, and every time that I open the door, all the letters are on the floor. Why nobody can grab them and put it where I said? I was like, okay, so I have a question. So what do you do when you open the door and see all the mail on the ground?
Yeah.
She's like, I'm just screaming and pick it up. I was like, that's the problem.
Right, yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that moment, you just need to say, to ask someone from your family members, because they are part of your family, to pick it up and put it where it belongs. Don't do it. You don't have to scream. You don't have to yell. And I think with moms, this part about the boundaries, it's really hard, especially because kids usually goes to mom. Dad can be there, but they come and ask to mom. Unless mom gives them the answer that they don't want, then they go to dad, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes what I do is just I redirect her. Go ask dad. Like right now I'm doing this, go do it yourself or ask dad. Because we don't have to, you know, do like being cooking and also at the same time like trying to, you know, solve a situation with your children. So I feel like you were saying, sometimes it's really hard to do it with loved ones, but I think is helpful, and especially with our children, they need to know what boundaries are so they can also start implementing it on their lives.
Yeah.
Oh, that is such a good point too,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think children need boundaries for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, everybody does, but
Everybody
yes,
does.
but especially
But
children.
I
yeah.
almost think, like, you just had me thinking that sometimes the boundaries that we establish with friendships happen and the other person doesn't really even realize they're happening.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I really love.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
you're just slowly accepting or putting parameters around. Oh yeah, well, gee, I can't meet that day, but how about this day? How about we meet earlier or for you know, like you're
Right.
neutralizing.
Yeah. Let's have coffee instead of lunch.
Right,
You know?
or-
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But you're neutralizing the situation and finding a comfort level for yourself, and you're almost feeling out the situation until you determine your real boundaries. So it doesn't have to be a hard stop
Right.
situation.
Yes.
It really is kind of a soft boundary, so to speak, because it's
like you were
movable.
saying. Yeah, absolutely. Because maybe in certain friendships, there's been change over the years.
Yes.
Where maybe I don't want to lose this friendship, but how can there be adjustments? And it just sounds like certainly a foundation of setting boundaries is A, knowing what they are for you, and 2, communication.
Yes.
Being able to have conversations or communicate to someone in a non-threatening, non-aggressive way, but being able to have that conversation doesn't have to be a big, long, like we're sitting down talking, but just being able to express what we think, need, or feel.
And I would like to mention something that sometimes I struggle, and I think we were talking about this, Barb, and sometimes like saying that phrase that is not gonna be so rough, or saying like, no, I don't wanna do that, and having that like nice phrase where you feel comfortable, where you can express that boundary. I think sometimes even if it sounds silly, like practicing it, you know, like thinking about it. How should I say or how should I react if somebody asks me to add another meeting to my schedule and I want to have a dinner with my kids that night? Which way should I answer? You know what, I have a commitment. Can we change it for tomorrow? Or let me check my agenda, I will get back to you. You know,
I
having
would
those.
prefer to maybe push that off until next week. Or
Exactly.
The second
you know, I have a priority, that commitment that I really can't change. You know, there are soft words that we can use. We're really covering a lot of these questions with some great content, because the negative consequence could be a deadline. You know, that's coming up, but you know, maybe you say, well, gee, maybe I could zoom in, you know, after dinner and something like that.
I think second hardest thing that women struggle with, other than saying no, are hard conversations. And it's because of that guilt piece.
Yes.
And or that we've been silenced in that asking for the boundaries, or you know, saying what we need to say and what we really feel, and being able to articulate that. Women have a hard time with hard conversations, and that's what breeds gossip, breakdown of relationships, and all different other things. So sitting down and practicing with a coach on how you're going to do it, and it's okay if it means something to you. Yes, you should, like you said, set an intention. Take time to figure out how you want to say it, because if the intention is reconciliation and connection, then it deserves the time to work with that and learn how to do it.
I love that, and using the right words too sometimes, because it can
Yeah.
soften it and make it feel right for you.
Yeah,
So
absolutely,
important, so important.
I have a question that's actually not here, but just to put it out there because it happens with clients, it happens a lot, is you put your thought and feeling out and you get gaslighted. You're too emotional, you're too oversensitive, you know, whatever that might be. I'm just curious, what's that thought? Any thoughts about how, you know, how a viewer, like, I'm sure somebody's like, oh my gosh, I hear that. How could a viewer kind of handle that situation?
Yeah, I let people believe whatever they want to believe. So I say things like, well, that may be so, but I'm going to continue going on and being the way that I am. Or, you know, maybe I'm just not the right person for you. You know, if you think that I'm too emotional, you know, maybe I'm too emotional for you, but I'm just the right amount of emotional for me. You know, so I just let people have whatever opinion they have.
Gaslighting on that level is one thing, but when you're gaslit out of your reality,
Yeah.
you know, as is my personal experience, where, you know, I can say the dishes need to be done and no they don't, or the sky is blue and no it's green, like absolute destruction in your mind. Gaslighting, we need more education around it. We need to know what that means. We need to know what our bottom lines are, what we're willing to accept in interactions with clients or otherwise, because just as much as I've walked away from some unhealthy relationships and friendships and family, I will fire a client that wants to push on something that, you know, if they're trying to convince me they're not respecting where I'm at, you know. It's one thing to say, well, you agree, you know, I respect your opinion and move on, but when they are trying to, you know, especially around politics and things like that, where somebody's trying to make me see it their way and only their way, I'll dismiss that person with love and sometimes with attitude, to be quite honest, because I love myself today. So I respect and the healing that has to go on for you to regain some sense of sanity when gaslighting has been in your story so you know, so deeply. So I think that's really, we gotta know the difference between gaslighting in a innocent, correctable way
Right,
and
yes,
gaslighting in a
agreed.
detrimental
Yes,
way.
right, because it's one of the most damaging things that can happen to a person.
Absolutely. I
Any
think we
thoughts
have
on that one?
Maybe it's not 100% related, but when she was talking, what I was thinking is like, I'm sure if I ask all of you and the people that are watching us, do you think you're valuable? Do you feel like you're worth it? Everybody's gonna say yes, but sometimes I feel we act like we are not. When we don't put those boundaries, when we let guilt to take advantage, and I feel it goes hand in hand with the gaslighting, in the sense like, if you don't honor what you want and what you believe in your feelings, and I think that's part of it. Like, yeah, you know you are worth it, you know that you're important, you're valuable, but sometimes our actions doesn't reflect that.
right, and if we act that we're valuable, then people will see it.
Oh yeah.
And I think we have time for just one more round to wrap this up, because we've really had
Covered a
some
lot of ground,
We
yeah.
really
Yeah.
have. So, what's our last one?
I think we can combine the last two, because
Yes.
I think that they're super important. One was, as women, we are powerful, and that was something that we discussed, and I'd love people's thoughts on, you know, how we show up with that. But, you know, definitely something that I think is super important is that we talk to ourselves the most. Our inner dialogue is always going, and I would really encourage everyone, especially women, to start trying to shift the inner dialogue to, what I'm saying, is this kind? Is this helpful? Is this true?
And having meaningful conversations with others too, beyond what you're saying, with ourselves,
Yeah.
you know, positive, and what you said about
Yeah.
how we feel
Yes. Yes.
valuable.
Let's end
so let's-
about being in our power.
Yes.
So I heard Brooke Castillo from the Life Coach School say this a long time ago. I talk to myself more than I listen to myself. And so I literally talk to myself more than I listen to myself in terms of words I say in my head, but I also talk to myself by saying affirmations, by writing out, by doing mindset journaling. I have an app that sends me affirmations. I have a task thing that actually sends me affirmations. I write things on my mirrors. I put little sticky notes in little hidden places in my home, because I find when I put a sticky note on the mirror, eventually I don't see it anymore. But when it's in the drawer where my paper from my printer is, I open it and it says, "You're doing great," or "There's always more," or "It's happening, it's working, I can see it." So I talk to myself more than I listen to myself. And, I always thought I had high self-esteem, and yet I found I had so much crap going on in here that I need to, I am continually cleaning the reservoir of my mind by putting the medicine of positive statements in.
And so important, so important. This is why solitude, I feel like, is most important. If my voice isn't the loudest in my head, something is not right. And I am only powerful if I'm in my most authentic truth. It's people are so afraid of being alone these days, forcing themselves into relationships and connections all the time. If we don't spend enough time in solitude, there's a difference between loneliness and solitude. And I think more people should explore that solitude to make sure that they're stepping out into the world with their own message, making sure that because that is powerful. When I speak, even other speaking commitments, I don't write anything down, because if it's not if it's not resonating with me in that moment, speaking to that audience, then it's not going to have the power, the oomph, and the hit that you want it to have. So solitude is a good way to stand on power.
Yeah.
I think as a motivation, like talking specifically to moms, our kids are always watching. And I think that would be like a great motivation for us, having that internal conversation, because we reflected, but also those comments when sometimes we are not thinking, but the kids are catching up. I think it's important. Like we can, like you were saying, probably not having that enough kind conversation in our mind. Like, will you say that to your children? Will you say that to your friend? I don't think you will do that. And I think it's so important, and I realize, because it's a process. Self-love is a process. So every day, sometimes it feels silly when I do it, but I look at myself in the mirror in the morning and I was like, you look gorgeous, you look great.
Yeah.
I do too. I tell myself I love myself in the mirror almost every time I go to the bathroom. I say I love you just the way you are.
Love it. Love
So
it.
Diane, I want to bring you in to kind of wrap up the show and kind of your final thought on that we are powerful.
What I do, my theme is at night before I go to bed, I want the most positive thoughts in my head before I go to bed. If they're not in my head already, then what I like to do is put on a podcast from somebody like Mel Robbins or Kathy Heller or something like that, so that I get a message for the evening that I can dream on. And when I wake up in the morning, for the most part, I always feel amazing, because I put positive thoughts in my head before I go to bed at night. If I want to write down something that's a positive thing, like I said, or listen to a podcast just for a few minutes even, just to set the tone for the next day.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, we are so thrilled that you all joined us today. What a great conversation we had.
Yeah,
Great way to
Thank you for
start
having
off
us.
the year.
Yes,
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you, and
Loved
we
it.
look forward to seeing you soon.